Okay, good morning. I think we're ready to get started. And welcome to the Nampa City Council meeting. And as usual, we have a tradition, and that is that we open in prayer and the pledge. And since I don't have anybody assigned, I think I'll just lead this morning. So let's open in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, a new day. Thank you, Lord, that we have the privilege of serving and waking up and getting up and serving our community this day. And Lord, today, as every day, we ask, God, for your covering. We ask for your wisdom today as we make decisions and discuss the issues of the city. We ask, God, that you would direct our steps and that you would guide our conversations and that we would have your wisdom. I thank you, Father, for the city council members, for the entire team, and for this community. Thank you for joining us today in Jesus' name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll begin with roll call.
Rodriguez?
Here.
Bruner?
Here.
Jen Gula?
Here.
Reynolds?
Here.
Haverfield?
Okay. Thank you very much. So this morning we have a couple of different items on the agenda, and we're going to start with one that should be pretty fast. It was in our packet. It's just a discussion regarding the notification of enforcement of code for mobile food vendors, and I'm just going to go over it with you. In your packet, it had a timeline of the events around our food trucks. As you guys probably definitely remember, we've had a lot of discussion around our food trucks. So because we're coming up against the date that we had said that we would go ahead and enforce our code, we thought it might be good to go ahead and send another notification out to our food truck vendors. I think one of the things that we recognized was that the notification did go out to the food truck vendors and not to the property owners. And so a discussion that we had this past week was that we also need to notify the property owners. Even though we've had a lot of discussion, we do have some new food trucks that have popped up since we've made the decision to go ahead and enforce the code. And you know, as you know, in all the discussion that's taken place, a decision of the city, it does impact lives. And so it's hard because it's going to, for some, it means that you can no longer do business as you've been doing business. However, when we don't enforce code, for one, it impacts others. And the other side of this is that we have businesses that the value of their properties and their businesses are impacted by our lack of code enforcement. And as I'm sharing this, I'm sharing it, I know I see you guys shaking your heads because we've had a lot of discussions about this and we understand the impact. So basically, and I put this as an action item, but it really isn't an action. It is a discussion and just notification to council to ensure that you're okay with us going ahead and sending out communication that I believe we had discussed at the end of October that we would go ahead and be enforcing our code as it relates to overnight. Just one other thing. When we were changing and our license for food trucks, we have zoning, and Christy's here and can answer any questions about that. And then code enforcement's here also, Kent, if we have any questions for them. But you've got the license side of the food truck, which is the food truck license. That license had to be submitted to the FBI for their review, and it was back, I believe, in March. They are way, way, way behind, and it's been sitting there for 6 months, and we still don't have feedback from them to where we can move forward with the food truck license as it is. However, our code, both our old code and the new code that we will be adopting, because I think we realized we hadn't fully adopted it. Is that correct, Christy? Yes. But both codes do not allow for overnight parking of the food trucks. And so what we want to do is we've wanted to give ample communication. So we did back on June 7th with a letter. We not only mailed the letter, but we hand-delivered the letter. I so appreciate the work of Kent and his team. They have gone out and done a new assessment, so we know what new food trucks are out there. And so we will be both mailing and hand-delivering, and we will be, with that, we will give a cover letter that we are going to be enforcing as of the end of October. So we're giving them another 30-day notice in addition to their prior, and we'll be attaching the former letter that was sent. So when we do something like this, needless to say, you guys get the phone calls. So with that, I just wanted to bring it up before council.
Excuse me, Mayor Tling, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good, I'm done.
Okay. Last Saturday, I have to tell you about what I did. I have the festival for downtown September 30th, and it's our Faith, Family, and Freedom Festival at Lloyd Square. So my granddaughter and I went out to every food truck in Nampa on that Saturday. It took us 3 hours. And of who we spoke with, that was everybody I could think of, and when we passed by a food truck, we'd stop and talk to them and invite them to this festival. Mayor, I had to say that almost 85 to 90% of them said, oh, we can't go, we can't move. And I thought, whoa, hold on here. So I was kind of surprised by that statement. And, boy, I thought, well, you're going to be moving soon. But the fact that they said we can't move because we're stationary, I thought, is that your attitude? Apparently, and they must be the ones that popped up because no one said we can't move. I mean, that they'd be there because they're stationary. So I wonder, what are they thinking? I'm not sure, but it was kind of unnerving to hear that, hey, they're stationary. No, they don't have to move. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that is interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And boy, some of them were Hispanic. I had to speak Spanish with them, which I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with them to do their business. But when they tell me they can't move, I'm going, wow.
That just reminded me that, and I'll visit with Shar about this, but if you could communicate, we actually need to translate that letter. It needs to be given both in Spanish and in English, and so we can get that done. Christy, is there anything that I have missed that we should cover?
Mayor and council, I don't think so. I mean, this is a really good process. I think the two-step process, going through the code adoption, sending out the notices in advance, all of that, I think, you're preparing them for this. I guess I have a question for you, Councilman Rodriguez. Were they saying they can't move because their license doesn't allow them to move, or were they saying they can't move because of the way they are set up physically? They've positioned themselves to be permanent.
I don't know about the license and didn't talk to them
Okay.
about that. But they were stationary. They had tables, chairs, and they were backed up. Some of them were backed up against the building, and so they would have to pick up everything, move it, and take it to the Lloyd Square, and then bring it back. It's easy for them just to stay put.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. It doesn't meet any of the codes that we've had in place ever, but
No,
it makes sense.
I understand, but there were several that were still connected to their vehicles,
Yes.
and those I didn't even talk. I didn't ask them if they were going to be, but because they're mobile.
Right.
But one in particular is over here off of by Karcher Mall, and that owner said, well, it's too hard for me to move. I'm just going to stay here. I can't move.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Okay.
Yeah, that just says to me that, they haven't read
Well, they
the
haven't.
city's code. They don't know what it means.
So I'm wondering, Mayor, if a one-on-one visit with them, and if you have, they speak English, most of them do, but for those that don't, I'm okay with going talking to them with a city official, with someone with Kent. You have to buy me a Coke probably or a coffee, but I don't mind that because we're talking about communication, so they'll completely understand. I don't know if a letter will make them understand as to why and what. So I'm okay with that if that's what you have in mind, Kent.
It's a great process.
Thank you.
Mayor, quick
Thank you,
question,
yes.
and maybe it's in here and I didn't read. What is the
enforcement process if there's not compliance.
Who'd like to speak to that? I'll let Kent. He gets the privilege of going around and communicating and having these discussions.
Mayor, Council. The enforcement process is, of course, we'll communicate with the property owner and the food vendor owner. A letter will be sent, 10 days will be given to make the corrections. If not corrected, a second letter will be sent, 10 more days will be given. If it's still not corrected, then we turn it over to the clerk's office. Clerk's office will revoke the license, and then that will become the violation. And then a citation will be issued to the food vendor and property owner.
And by citation, financial
Misdemeanor, a misdemeanor citation. That's the only avenue we have.
And if that, and I know I'm taking it to the extreme, but if that's not, then doesn't seem to affect them. Is that an MPD or a county sheriff's office, or who handles the?
No, code enforcement.
So you guys go out there on your own?
Yes.
With police?
Normally with the police, yeah.
Yeah, I just personally would suggest that.
Yeah, it can get hairy.
Those squirt guns don't kind of help with.
No.
And that is only for those that are in total violation.
No, yeah, I'm saying that's the extreme, and hopefully that would never be the case, but who knows in this day and age.
And we work really hard to try not to get to that point. Our goal is always voluntary compliance.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, council, unless there's any comment or concern, it really isn't an action item unless we felt like it, but it is a process we're going to be beginning, and any concerns, other concerns? Okay, perfect. Okay, we're going to move on to the second item on our agenda today, and this is a discussion about our GO bond. Mark, thank you, and Eric, thank you for being here. As we get started, Mark, I'd like to make a quick comment. Sure. So Randy Haverfield and I were visiting. He's unable to be here today, and for those online, Randy Haverfield is the president of our council. And I can't speak for Randy, but of course there's a concern whenever you talk about a bond and taxes. I just want to say that I feel like and the reason we're bringing this forward is that we have a responsibility as a city to consider how to fund the incredible costs we have as we move forward, especially on the transportation side. And we've had the privilege, and Mark, you may be saying this, but we've had the privilege of using the GO bond to do the King's Overpass and some other improvements that made a massive difference in our city. And as it is being paid off, to replace that bond with a similar taxing authority, and Mark will talk about this, is not new taxes. And so I just want to begin this discussion because I think the public may have a perception, especially as elected officials, this is a new tax and why are you taxing us? But it also goes to vote. And Mark will cover all of this, but I just want you to say that I have asked that we bring this forward before the council. We've had tremendous discussion and a lot of thought that has gone into this, and it's very, very important. And it isn't because we don't care about our public, it's because we care about our public. That's why we're here today, is because there's a lot of work to be done and we've got to figure out how to do it. And the question before the council is going to be, do we want to allow the voters of Nampa, the citizens of Nampa, to vote on whether they want these improvements done? And so I just want to lay that foundation as we begin. Mark, thank you for your tremendous work on this. It's appreciated.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and good morning to you and members of the City Council. I'm Mark Story, the Director of Strategic Initiatives. With me this morning is Crystal Craig, our Director of Transportation, and Mr. Eric Herringer with Piper Sandler, who's our city's contract municipal advisor. It's also my understanding that Doug Racine might be joining us. I think he's landing in Florida right about the time of this presentation, but I'm sure he'll be participating here shortly. So we're pleased this morning to provide you with a planning discussion on a proposed general obligation bond issue to assist NAMPA in funding critical transportation projects. The results of the recent community survey highlighted traffic congestion and growth as a major citizen concern and the need for upgrading the city's transportation system as the solution to this issue. While the city does receive local, state, and various grant funding to supplement project costs, we are still facing a deficit in meeting total needs, and a GO bond issue is an option to reduce this deficit. So as you may be aware, the city conducted a bond election in May of 2004, which received well over the 2/3 necessary to move forward with a bond sale. The 20-year term bond occurred in 2005 and resulted in approximately $38 million to fund transportation and wastewater capital improvements. Of the $38 million, $3 million was allocated to wastewater and was paid back with interest in the first 10 years through wastewater user rates, and the remaining was applied to transportation projects and paid back with interest over 20 years through the property tax roll. The bond was refinanced twice in 2012 and 2022 at lower interest rates, which achieved significant debt service savings. The average per year debt through that term was about $2.6 million per year. This bond will be repaid fully in August of 2024, hence why we are here today to look at a new GO bond issue, so essentially replacing one with the other. So let's talk a little bit about what was accomplished with that money. Here's a list of projects that were funded from the original GO bond. These projects were delivered between 2005 and 2006. First is the Garrity Boulevard widening project from Grant Street up to the 84 interchange. This project added lanes of travel, intersection improvements, sidewalk and landscaping, and really was a precursor to much of the economic development that occurred along that corridor following that construction. Next was Kings Corner Railroad Overpass, which was a congestion relief project, adding 2 bridges on Kings and Amity, greatly improving connectivity in the area, along with improving safety by eliminating those at-grade crossings. Lastly was the Treasure Valley Sewer Line, providing needed sewer service to the commercial retail development on the north side of the freeway at Karcher. So talking a little bit about the pros and cons of a GO bond. Pros, as I mentioned earlier, city leaders and our citizens are calling for effective and efficient transportation infrastructure. A 20-year bond would provide up to $34.9 million for needed capital improvements, and most of those could be completed within 5 to 7 years. Mr. Herringer will provide more details on the different options for GO bond issuance. There will be no property tax increase to citizens over what they pay now. Bond revenue would leverage growth impact fees to expand overall project scope, and many of the proposed projects are already in the design phase for quick mobilization, and Crystal will talk a little bit about this later in the presentation. Cons, when the current bond is fully repaid next summer, there would be a reduction in property tax for citizens if a new bond was not issued. This reduction would be around $60 to $70 per property. The bond sale would need to receive a 2/3 vote in May of 2024. This is sometimes a difficult hurdle to clear, and there would be only one ballot opportunity before the current bond is repaid. Lastly, there was always various concerns over the city incurring debt. So now I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Herringer to talk a little bit more.
Mayor, if I may, and maybe you will answer this. So the statement there, no property tax increase to citizens, does that not depend on the length of the bond and the interest rates? I mean, so is that something you're going to address? Yep. Okay, thanks. Yep. I just want to make sure that's a totally true statement.
Well, could I make one comment, which does not have to do with the actual bond itself? In looking at this, our team has looked at what could be accomplished within, so the amount of money you borrow really depends on the projects you want to accomplish. And
Correct.
So the intent, and I just want everyone to understand, our intent as we move forward was not to have an increase. So that's the intent behind it. Now, the actual side of it, I'll let you speak to that, but the intent was not.
Just, Mayor, as you know, if we're going to make that statement, I want to make sure that we are making sure that that's the case, that we're not
Absolutely.
increasing that.
And Eric, will you speak to the fact that the 600,000, I'm not sure where that's going to come in, because we actually had in our fund about $600,000, and because of that, it did cause our property taxes to go down just a hair this year. And so there's that little disparity that could make a difference, if that makes sense, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mark, for introducing me. Eric Herringer with Piper Sandler. I'm the municipal advisor. I worked on your sewer revenue bond project, and in fact, I worked on the 2004 bond originally. I'm getting to the point where I've seen bonds that I've worked on pay off, which wasn't really in my thought process in 2004. So it is a great time to be thinking about this type of project when you do have a bond being paid off. And we've been running some analysis around this for the last couple of years. So the assumptions that we have for this bond issue are laid out here. So, this assumes a May election. And with a May election, a successful election, you could sell the bonds in August and have all the money in the bank by August of 2024. And then you'd certify those property taxes for the tax year 24, which is the city's fiscal 25. And so it would dovetail with the expiring bond. What we did with the analysis is we looked at 3 different repayment terms, 20, 25, and 30 year, but all sized to figure out how much would that yield in terms of project dollars by keeping the payment at $2,670,000, which has been the payment on the bond for the last 7 to 10 years. We also took, interest rates change. They change every day. We're taking current interest rates from when we ran this analysis on September 12th, added 0.5% just to have some cushion in there, some conservatism about what could happen with rates going higher, so that when you decide on a project scope, it can be delivered with the plan. We assume a bond rating. That's a credit rating. The city, it's pretty easy for us to assume because you have a credit rating on your bonds right now. It's AA3 for Moody's. It's a very strong bond rating, means that you can get very favorable interest rates. And then I mentioned that we looked at the 2025 and 30-year payback. So this is the summary of the analysis. And you got 20-year repayment term, 25 and 30. If you start with that all-in interest, true interest cost, that is the sort of full cost of borrowing with the cost of issuance baked into it, the Moody's fee, attorneys, our fee. So the full cost of borrowing is that all-in true interest cost. Remember, there's a 0.5% cushion in there. So what's interesting to me is if you look at that 20-year 4.54%, you subtract 0.5 from that, you're at 4.04. Your GO bond from 2004 was 4.03. So we're almost in the same interest rate environment as when you sold those bonds back in 2004, 2005. Importantly, the project fund deposit on the 20-year is $34.6 million. So that's the answer to the question. How much could the city receive with a 20-year repayment term, keeping the payments the same? You'd be looking at $34.6 million. With interest, the total repayment of that bond would be $53.3 million. So if you divide that by 20, you come up with the annual payment of $2,667,000. So that's that $2.67 million that we're trying to hit as a not to exceed annual payment. So then you divide that into your taxable market value. This is updated for 2023, $18 per 100,000. So that, in terms of the tax impact, and the way the ballot looks now, one of the required ballot disclosures is that you disclose the estimated cost per 100,000 of the bond proposal based on current conditions. Current conditions is your current market value. When we do this analysis for the ballot, we typically update it for current interest rates because that's the way the code reads. So, we would, if this does move forward for a May election, we'd update this prior to the ballot being approved.
Mayor Kling, May I ask a question?
Yes, or could we hold questions till he's done in case he's going to answer it as he goes? I think I'd like to ask, can you write your question down so you don't forget it? And then let's go ahead and let you walk through this, and then, because we could be asking questions you may be answering.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if you look at the 25 years, so this is just, okay, let's see it, well, if we borrow for longer, you know, it's like a mortgage, you know, I can keep my payment lower by spreading out the repayment term longer. So I can get more money into the project fund if I go 25 years, you can get 38.5 million. So that's 4 million more, but if you look at how much more interest cost there is, that's the drawback. It's going to increase the interest cost from 18.7 to 28.1. So that's about a $9.5 million increase in interest to get an extra 4 million. And if you go out 30 years, same idea. The interest rate's higher because you go out longer, but you can spread those payments out. So you can get more money. You can get another 7 million compared to the 20-year. So instead of 34.6, 41.5. But as you can see, the interest cost goes up pretty substantially, almost 20 million more compared to the 20-year option. So, you know, you have to sort of balance, you know, more money today versus a higher overall output over a 30-year period versus 20. The bottom line, of course, is that we're oversizing everything to that annual payment. And that annual payment, 2.67, produces a tax impact of $18 per 100,000. I'll just go to, so we talk about interest rates. Like I said, we have a 0.5% cushion in those rates as we're looking at it today. This is a snapshot of what municipal bond interest rates have looked like over the last 20 years. And you know, we're approaching a high point, at least over the last 10-year cycle. But if you go back over a 20-year period, we're still below some of the rates we saw in the early 2000s. And, you know, I identified where that 2004 GO bond was sold. It's about where we're at today. What I think is interesting here is that the city chose some really good times to refinance, and that's illustrated in this chart. You refinance bonds in 2012 when rates were at their, you know, all-time lows for the time, and then again in 2021 when rates went down even further, took advantage of that. So the city's been really wise in terms of managing that existing bond and taking advantage of refinancing opportunities. And then this is just another way to look at the history of interest rates. And what this is it tracks interest rates for different lengths of debt. So 1 year is the first year, 30 years the last year. The gray bars are the range of rates for that 1 year or 30 year or anywhere in between for the last 20 years. The orange line is the average during that 20-year time period, and the blue line is where we're at currently. And what I think is interesting about this is we all hear that the Fed's raising rates, and the Fed has been raising rates. And they met yesterday, didn't raise rates, but the indication is they'll probably raise rates another quarter point before the end of the year. What the Fed is doing is raising those short-term interest rates, and that's why that blue line is much higher than the orange line in years 1 through 9, for example. That's where you see the impact of what the Fed is doing. What the Fed is doing has less impact on the 20-year and 30-year bond because the market is thinking, well, long-term interest rates will come back down once the Fed gets inflation under control. So I have a lot of clients who are like, is now the time to borrow because, you know, geez, rates are high, and well, rates are going to, you know, probably be at this level for at least another 6 to 9 months, if not longer, as the Fed fights inflation. But keep in mind that those longer term interest rates that you're locking in aren't really all that elevated relative to a historical standard. Now, they're certainly higher than they were 2 years ago, but, you know, keep in mind that there will be opportunities to refinance as the city has done in the past, and the city has taken advantage of those opportunities when the time comes. Again, I think the real opportunity, of course, is with this existing bond going away. You can put this new one on, and it really has no material impact to a taxpayer. It is true that if you don't decide to do this, or if the voters say no, yes, the taxes will go down, because you can't tax for something that you don't need to repay on the bond side. I will address the question about this year, because it is the last year of the bond, and there is money in the bond fund that has to, the actual tax levy is lower than 2.67 million this year, because you have some reserves that are being applied to make that last payment. So if we're talking about keeping the bond at 2.67 million, that is no increase compared to what taxpayers have been paying for the last 10, 20 years, but it will be a little higher than it is this year because of that lower tax levy because of those reserves. And I think that's what the mayor was alluding to earlier. But it's pretty nominal when you think about $18 per 100,000. And that's the end of my slide, so I'm ready for questions.
Oh,
Councilman
Yeah.
Rodriguez,
Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. Is this an urban renewal project?
No.
It's not, it's the city of Nampa.
This would be, the way I understand it, I mean, a GO bond is a city of Nampa, getting voter approval to incur debt, borrow money, and repay it with property tax.
Okay, so, and this is for Tom, is this a project driven as far as the city of Napa is concerned? And this 2.6 million that's in there now, could we be using that to shift over rather than get a GO bond and apply it to the city to the city budget?
Mayor, City Council. So Crystal's going to talk about some of the projects that we could build with this funding. But the important part of this is this $30+ million. We want to use that so we can maintain our level of service and actually improve it. And that's the super important part about this. And the reason that's important is because we actually do want to increase our impact fee. But as we've talked about in the past, you can't use an impact fee to increase the level of service. But if we have a better level of service because of this large influx of money, we can go build some projects, then we can actually increase the percentage on the growth portion of our impact fee. So this, not only is this a great thing, we're not going to increase property tax, but it gives us a chance to get ahead. And so I hope I answered your question.
No, that's fine.
And there's-
Okay.
I'd like Eric to answer the question, thank you, also, please.
Yeah, to the point of can you convert that 2.7 million or 2.67 million over? No, you've been authorized to. So the vote in 2004 authorized you to borrow money, and then levy a property tax to repay it. And once it's repaid, that authority to levy the tax goes away.
Okay.
Yep.
Also, one more question to follow up. And this 2.6 million that we are repaying for the GO bond, are we making interest off of that? Are you making interest off of that? Because money's invested, right, from your office. And so what is the return on the investment of 2.6 million?
Well, we're not investing it. So the city is, when the city collects the property tax, the county collects the property tax, and then the city receives basically two big chunks of that property tax revenue. And so when that money's in your bond fund, and I'm pretty sure that the city is investing that at the LGIP. I'm not positive about that.
I don't know what the LGIP.
That's the local government investment pool.
Okay.
There's a lot of, most local governments, their excess cash they have. And so it is earning interest in those funds. I don't know how much.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And you know how much that is?
Yeah, I mean, right now, the LGIP is paying about close to 5%.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But remember, there's not huge, the period of time the money's in that fund is no more than 6 months, because the money comes in from the county, and then it gets paid out in interest or principal and interest payments every 6 months. And so those payments on the bond match up pretty closely with when those tax receipts come in from the county.
Okay, so that's what I was, in the red tape issue, I call it. Are the taxpayers going to be increasing based on assessed value of their homes and the market, the economy.
So I think the question is, so I think when the annual payment on the bond is level, and if people's property taxes, if people's assessed value goes up, and there's no new construction, so just to say, it's the same taxpayers paying $2.67 million, and there's no new taxpayers. If the assessed value goes up, the tax rate goes down. So if I'm a homeowner, the amount I pay on this bond should stay the same or go down. And it will go down because there's new construction. There's new taxpayers increasing the base.
I see.
The rate's not set.
It fluctuates, right?
The rate goes, if market value goes up, the rate goes down.
Okay.
If market value goes down, the rate goes up.
Okay.
And
That's specific to the levy.
Yeah.
Right, you're talking about the levy.
the bond levy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, not the interest rate, the bond levy.
Correct.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
key is that this loan, this does not go up and down based upon any interest rates. It's locked in.
Correct.
It's locked in, it stays consistent, and whether an assessed value on a home goes up or down, this particular annual payment does not change. Now, the levy, as you said, there's fluctuation in that, and there's a whole lot that influences that. But the actual payment, nothing changes in that regard. Once we make this, if we were to choose to make this commitment, as we did in the last 20 years, it stays consistent. Am I answering that correctly?
Correct.
Okay.
And I would also say that if I was a taxpayer in Nampa, the dollar amount that I paid toward this bond is lower today than it was in 2004.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Because your tax base has grown
So much.
from
Yeah.
new growth that's come in, and now you've expanded the tax base. So there's more people paying, there's more people contributing to that 2.67 million than in 2004. And so
Right, right.
Considerably.
Mayor, if I may, and I know Natalie has a bunch of questions, so she can summary.
You gonna beat her up there?
Yeah, no, I don't touch her with her high heels. You guys know that. Okay. Anyway, this last
Can you
one
put
was-
your mic in?
You
front
bet.
of
I'm
Thank
sorry. So I don't mumble too much. The last was 20 years, and I realize this rate annually, depending on the 100,000, 18 would stay the same. The main thing is, this body then would make a decision whether, if we decided to go with a GO bond, whether it's going to be a 20-year, a 25-year, or a 30-year. That would be on the ballot, correct? Okay. So the main thing is to keep consistent with this past GO bond over a length of time. It would not cost any more if we did a 20-year. If we did a 25 or a 30-year, yes, it'd be the same annually, but still it would extend then our taxpayers for another 5, 10, or whatever years. So that's where I guess I'm asking for the transparency, making sure. But if we just go with a 20-year, then I think we can, in a truthful manner, say, hey, this is not going to cost you any more. You understand what I'm saying? Annually, I realize that. But it is going to cost them more if we extend it to a 25 or a 30 over a period of time.
yeah, compared to the 20.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And-
Yeah, and by that statement, I would be saying, hey, this is not going to cost you any more, so for a 20-year period of time. So anyway, just, I think we're fine as long as we decide on the 20 years. So, okay.
The only significant difference between 20 years ago and today is that our buying power is significantly less. What we accomplished 20 years ago was significant. Today, the cost of putting a road in, the cost of sewer line, those costs have gone up so significantly that it's hard to accomplish as much with the same amount of money.
Mayor, as was said, though, I mean, I don't think it makes, in my personal opinion, does not make a whole lot of sense with the higher interest rates of the amount of dollars we get to do these type of repairs compared to what we have to pay back. So,
Agreed.
okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yes, Eric.
I'll just make a point to address one of the points you mentioned, which is so for the ballot, and there's a timeline that I think Crystal will cover. When you just determine what the ballot, if you decide to move forward with the bond election, the ballot language needs to include, you need to say how much, how long, and what for, right? So you will make that decision about the length of the bond. And so that won't be variable when you put it out for election.
Eric, thank you so much for lending your expertise over this. I didn't realize you were involved in the first one. I tell you what, institutional knowledge is invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I guess before you go, I realize Councilwoman
That's okay, yeah.
Natalie has
How
a
often
question.
can you refinance a bond?
That's an interesting, typically, you can refinance it at least once. There's been some tax law changes from the federal government that have changed the dynamic about the economic benefit of refinancing. So I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but you can refinance a bond one time with tax. So these bonds are tax exempt, which means that the investors who earn interest when they buy the bonds don't pay federal income tax, nor do they pay state of Idaho income tax. And because of that, the interest rates are lower than they would be if they were taxable. So the IRS cares a lot about not abusing this privilege. So they've basically said you can only refinance these bonds on a tax exempt basis after 10 years, effectively.
Okay.
So if it's a 20-year bond, you really kind of have one, maybe two shots at it.
So it does change. It does change how many times we can refinance versus the 28 versus the 30. Then we have more opportunities to refi.
Effectively, yes, because you're hitting those 10-year marks a little more.
Does it cost anything to refinance?
There are, yes. I mean, there are some issuance costs, just like when you issue anytime you issue bonds, there's going to be, a rating fee, attorneys, us. But those all get baked in. And so when you refinance the bonds, those costs were paid for through the refinancing process. Yep.
Do we ever do anything lower than a 20-year, or does it not make sense?
You can. I see some more rural communities when they do like school bonds, will look at a shorter repayment term just because they aren't anticipating a whole lot of growth. And so they're just looking at it going, well, if we can pay it off in 15 years, we'll save a lot of interest. Communities that are growing, I think about the equity of, boy, if I pay this off in 10 years, the people who move here in year 11 and 12, they get the benefit of what we did, but they don't pay for it. And so that's part of, the idea of investing through projects and then paying it back over a period of time where you match up the useful life of those projects with the repayment term. So is it possible? Yes. I think in a growth community like this, I think 20 years is kind of the sweet spot.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Eric? Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Crystal. And as I look at the clock, do you think we can wrap in about 10 minutes on this particular one? Yes? Okay, good. Thank you,
Morning.
Crystal.
I'll try and go faster. So I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head earlier. Anytime we open a discussion like this, it's challenging, right? So this is really the first step, and I want to talk to you about the why behind it, why we need it, and what this money could potentially go for. So I made this list. And this could be a working list. These aren't necessarily set in stone. I just wanted to highlight some examples of what we could use this money for. I broke it up into 5 different categories. Through this, I've attempted to pinpoint projects that I've either heard in my time here from the citizens saying, like, these projects are needed, this is what we want to see. I've tried to highlight projects that, as Tom alluded to, will help reset our level of service, which then could increase our impact fees and allow us to do even more growth for the city and pay for this growth. And I've tried to highlight projects that, honestly, it's hard for us to find money for. That because of the restrictions on how we can spend the different types of money that the city receives, these are the projects that tend to fall to the wayside because we don't have alternative funding sources for them. So the first is freeway and access congestion management. The big flag on this one is State Highway 16 South. I think everyone here knows that southerly connection is very, very needed. It's going to be a very expensive project. So finding alternative funding sources like this GO bond is instrumental in making it happen. Another one, Garrity Winco blocks, so that's all around Garrity. State Highway 16 going in is drastically affecting our Garrity interchange. I'm sure you guys have driven through it. It doesn't always operate well, especially when we have large events going through. We could see a lot of improvements in that. And then State Highway 45 realignment. The city has already dedicated 2 years of funding to this necessary project. This could also potentially help fund that project. Safe Route to Schools is are projects that we have alternative funding sources for, but the safety of our children is always of the utmost importance to us. So I'd be remiss in not saying we could do some sidewalk enhancements and ADA improvements throughout our city on something like this. Road maintenance, I think we hear that every single year from the citizen survey from the mayor. Transportation is one of the most important things to our citizens. Our streets are deteriorating. Our pavement indexes are going down, and we don't have ways to fix them right now. Our streets divisions do the best they can, and they really do a phenomenal job extending the life of our roads with chip seals, but our aging infrastructure is getting to the point that it's going to be failure. So we have to do something about it. We don't have any choice. Corridor widening, I highlighted a few of the ones that we've done corridor studies on. These are major north-south routes or east-west routes that absolutely need widening based on our traffic projections. They're just going to get hit really hard. And then the last was economic development and infrastructure. We've got some large utility projects coming in. The Joplin sewer that gets us all the way up to the north, to the river. The Purdom sewer expansion, which is along Ustick, which gets us all the way to State Highway 16 and allows us to keep those impact areas under the city of Nampa. And then any downtown improvements. There's been a lot of studies done in that area, and it needs some revitalization. So based on this, I tried to narrow it down a little bit more for you guys, which is right here. Councilman Bruner, you had mentioned earlier saying 20 years is what we want. And if that's the will of the council, but that's what, you said that's what would not increase taxes or impact our citizens more, right? So we were giving 3 different year projections at 20, 25, and 30. And so while 20, yes, it won't extend the life, it matches more the original GO bond. At 25 years and at 30 years, we could get more. So we have some options, and if that's the will of the citizens and the will of the council to say, hey, no, let's extend the life and get more out of this project right now, we can do that. So the projects right now on our recommended list, according to the city, first State Highway 16, this project's going to be anywhere between $70 and $90 million. That was my ballpark right now. I did not account for inflation on that, so you can use your imagination on how much it's going to be. So GeoBond could get us $17 to $18 million, depending upon which option we move forward with, if it moves forward. This will not fund the entire project, but it will get us through like a first phase. On a project like this, the first phase is always building the local roads, which that's the cost that comes to us, and we can't find alternative funding sources for. So it will really, really help in getting this kicked off and getting it moved forward, and then allow us to say we've invested some money into it, and then it gives us other opportunities for grants, for matching with the state and other cities around us. State Highway 45 realignment, it's about a $25 million project. Again, this will not get us through the entire project, but $5 million will get us through a phase. I put Purdom sewer on there. That could change with Joplin as well. Purdom right now is being slightly prioritized above just because of the State Highway 16 impacts on Ustick Road with there being an interchange there. We're going to see a lot of growth on the Ustick corridor, and it's going to be important to get our city utilities out to them. So throw some money at that one. Roadway rebuilds, I put $100 million project cost. We have over $100 million in roadway rebuild deficits. The number's probably closer to double, maybe triple throughout the city. This $8 to $10 million, depending upon what the funding goes for, can either go for mill and inlays, for full depth rebuilds, things like that. Also, if it's the will of the council, we could stand up an in-house construction crew, which would allow us to complete the roadway rebuilds ourselves at about half the cost of what it would cost us to go out to a contractor. So we've got some options there. And then the last one is corridor widening. I only included that on the 25 and the 30 year. Corridor widenings are typically impact fee eligible, so we do have other opportunities, but our impact fees only go so far. I'm sure you guys have seen traffic increase and our roads just aren't keeping up with it. $3.8 million will get us anywhere between 1 and 2 miles of roadway widening with today's current economy, depending upon how wide the road is. It's about $4 million to go from a 2-lane to a 5-lane for construction. So that's the end of mine, but I would love to answer questions if you guys have questions on the specific project examples. We don't have ways to fund these mega projects in other capacities.
So a comment I'd like to make is just thank you so much. You guys have done tremendous work. I don't think today is the day we need to come back, and whether we put this on another workshop agenda so that we can have a discussion around specific projects and answer questions, because this is just a beginning. Because there's a lot of discussion. I think you guys have done a phenomenal job in prioritizing and identifying, right, some potential projects. I do have a quick question on the grant side.
Mark's going to come back up and wrap it up for us too, so he may answer your
Crystal,
question.
thank you, and then we'll see you in a few minutes on the next one. Thank you. So,
Mayor,
yes.
this is Randy.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, just a quick question for Crystal. Are any of the projects listed impact fee eligible if it's under a GO bond funding process?
Councilman Haverfield, what I put as corridor widening could potentially be impact fee eligible depending upon which corridor it is. And the State Highway 16 South connection, we are going to be presenting this year to the DVAC committee to include that, but right now it is not impact fee eligible, but it may be in the long term.
Okay, Mayor, I just think, again, this is a messaging issue. Making sure that the citizens have a chance to vote on it obviously is important, and that's a part of this process anyway. But the message is growth paying for growth or not? So that's where there'll be mixed messages possibly being sent that you need to keep into consideration. But I'll hold the rest of my questions for another time.
Randy, thank you, and thank you for jumping in there.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So regarding grants, Mark, first of all, for council, I don't know if you know that Mark and then Chris Boaz are doing a phenomenal job in looking for grants. And the first option is to go after grants and see what we can fund through grants, because there isn't a cost, right, to the citizens. So we're doing everything we can. But we don't get to choose what grants are available and what grants we receive. We just do a phenomenal job of putting together a good grant package, and we work with our congressional delegation to get their support at the federal grant level. So that's taking place, but could you just speak very briefly to the likelihood of covering the same deficit that we have via grants?
Yeah, so none of this, approving a GO bond, precludes us from going after grants as actively we have been. We'll continue going after that just as hard, but we still have that small deficit, and that's where we need to find additional funding sources. So absolutely, we're going after it as hard as we can.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll just wrap this up real quick here. Looking ahead, here's a timeline that staff is, if staff were directed to move forward with the GO bond implementation, January, February of 2024, the team would finalize the list of proposed projects, and we can do additional workshops to kind of focus in on exactly what projects the City Council would want to get completed. We'd look at their corresponding scope and determine exactly the amount of a bond to request. Then no later than early March, the City Council would need to adopt a bond election ordinance, and this is prepared by our bond counsel. Then staff would file and submit the ballot language to the county by the deadline of March 22nd in order for the initiative to be placed on the ballot on May 21st of 2024. If approved, interest rates would be locked in, the bonds would be sold, and then the proceeds received sometime in August. The balance of the proceeds would be invested until spent on the approved projects. An interest payment would be due in February of 2025, and then the first principal and interest payment would be due in August of 2025. So that ends my presentation. Again, we're all here to answer any questions if there's any remaining.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions? My hope is that we would be making a decision by the end of the year. I recognize, for example, when we have a county filing deadline on March 22nd, our decision needs to be made long before that, because The communications department, as Amy is sitting here, needs time to put together the educational campaign to educate the public. And that, the last Mond election, it fell on her shoulders. And and obviously we did that to save money, but it's a heavy lift. And we did an excellent job last time, but I think it's important that we have a ramp, a long enough ramp in this decision so we can get a plan put together if we do need to, we move forward and educate our public.
Mayor, one quick question. Do we have historical as far as what the percentage of the vote rate was back in the original bond?
I think you said it was 76 point something.
That's
It
what
was
I
in
read.
there,
That's what I
yeah.
read, I thought.
72%, I believe, so
72.
it was well over the two-thirds.
So high, yeah. So whatever, so my suggestion, you do such a fabulous job, whatever marketing you did on that one, maybe look at that closely. Okay, if you got that.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, team. You've done excellent work. Thank you. Yes. Yes, Randy.
And just another quick point, you might want to reach out to the school district to see if they are looking to run another bond series as far as an election process in May of next year as well.
Thank you. Our auditorium district will hit at the same time.
Yeah, so that, again, from a public perception, we need to either be project-specific with something that really does, makes a lot of sense to the average taxpayer, that these won't be impact fee eligible projects, and then also get the Nampa Development Corporation, if there are any areas that are project-specific that might fall in the Urban Renewal Agency instead.
Great. Randy, thank you. Thank you for those comments.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, team. Appreciate it. Okay, we are going to move on to the last new business discussion item, and this is the Airport Commission presentation, behind the scenes of airport funding. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me. I got to shake off the nerves a little. It's been a long time since I've done the presentation thing.
And thank you for sharing your name and your role as chair, so thank you.
Yes. So hello, City Council, and those interested in learning some about the Nampa Municipal Airport. Briefly, I am Aubrey Miller. I'm a native Idahoan. I learned to fly here at the Nampa Airport as a senior in high school, and then completed my aviation management degree at the University of North Dakota. This is my 4th year on the Airport Commission Board, but my experience lies on the HR side of things, staffing and training, and as a former business owner of a qualitative research facility. I'm currently a stay-at-home mom for a 6.5 and 4-year-old and doing some admin work part-time for a local nonprofit. So I appreciate your time joining, and my goal is to keep this succinct yet informational. The reason I have prepared this presentation on behalf of the Nampa Airport Commission is because there seems to be confusion around how the airport is funded, why a small yearly investment on the city's behalf each year has such a large return on investment, and why the municipal airport is an important piece to the city of Nampa. With Lindsay Johnson's help, I have included a summary of the municipal airport's rules with which it must comply, a summary of the money, who uses the airport, and the economic impact the Nampa Municipal Airport has on the city. First, the municipal airport has a 20-year master plan with a 10-year capital improvement plan that are both approved by the FAA and necessary to apply for federal aviation funding. Projects only eligible for FAA funding are included in this plan. Typically, the first 5 years of this plan cannot be changed, but the latter 5 years has the ability for a little flexibility, but it does have to have appropriate approval from the FAA. The Nampa Municipal Airport has a great working relationship with the regional agency in Montana. Having plans ready to execute has allowed projects to move faster in the past, which has helped our infrastructure in completing taxiways sooner than expected. Completed taxiways means more hangars can be built, and more hangars built means more revenue that the airport receives on hangar leases. The municipal airport is required to follow the FAA's Airport Compliance Manual in order to be eligible for federal aviation grant receipt. Basically, this means that the airport is to be available for public use, public aviation use with reasonable tenant terms imposed. Storage must be aeronautically based, airport uses or events must be aeronautical in nature, and revenues generated by the airport may only be used on capital and operating costs for the airport. Anything outside of these general uses, the Nampa Municipal Airport must contact the FAA for approval. The Nampa Municipal Airport is one of 3,300 airports in the country on the National Plan of Integrated Air Systems. Being on this list allows the airport to apply for federal and state funding in the form of Airport Improvement Plan Program grants. So this is what applies to our 10-year plan that we need. In order to receive these grants, the City of Nampa is asked to back 5 to 7% of the cost. A fun fact, out of the 3,300 airports, Idaho has 36 airports on this list. 4 are in the top 100 of based aircraft, including Caldwell, Coeur d'Alene, Nampa, and Boise, and Nampa ranks 61st on this list. The Treasure Valley has 3 airports on the top 100 of based aircraft, which speaks volumes toward the number of pilots in the valley, not to mention there is still a significant demand for hangar space. Did you know that federal block grants come from funding generated through federal taxes collected nationally on airline tickets, freightway bills, international departure fees, and sale of avgas and jet fuel, which is deposited into the FAA Aviation Trust Fund? This funding is available only to general aviation airports, airports designated as reliever airports, and non-primary commercial airline airports, those with less than 10,000 annual in-plane passengers. These airports are part of the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems list of 3,300. Projects are approved by the FAA and pay for up to 90% of the project costs. This means grant funding does not come from the average taxpayer, but mostly funded from aviation-related activities. The FAA does expect 5 to 7% of these grants to be backed by the city. The history behind this was that airliners agreed to pay these fees to provided relief airports for smaller, slower aircraft. The premise behind this idea was that general aviation pilots would be less likely to use the larger airports, so the airliners would not have to modify their operations, costing them valuable time and money. For example, for airliners to slow down and wait for smaller aircraft to use the airport, these costs add up. They add up in the form of employee hours by extended crew times, unnecessary flight time on the equipment, and the use of more jet fuel. Now, general aviation still uses and can land at these larger airports if the aircraft has the appropriate equipment and permission, but the initial idea was to encourage smaller aircraft to land at these smaller relief airports, and we're still benefiting from that to this day. So on this next slide here, Lindsay has helped put together a snapshot of the airport's total expenses. We have non-grant capital expenses, operating expenses, rental hangar revenue, land lease revenue, other non-grant revenue, and the total amount the municipal airport received from the city's general fund by fiscal year. The non-grant capital expenses include things such as match for FAA grants, new vehicles, tractors, or buildings constructed by or for the airport. In 2020, you will see a higher amount for the purchase of the Taylor property, but this will be reimbursed in the future and is on the capital improvement plan. Operating expenses include things such as salaries, airport maintenance, and snow removal. The total airport expenses listed are the sum of these two columns. The rental hangar revenue comes from monthly city rental rates. We currently have 20 facilities of different sizes, varying significantly in rates. Keep in mind, this is because there have been very few improvements made to these units. Some have dirt floors, no dividing panels, and only electricity, so no sewer or water. The land lease revenue comes from yearly payments made by hangar and business owners. The airport currently has 103 units. Building is continuing, and next year there will be 111 units. Other revenue includes money that comes from interest on our fund balance and sale from some assets from years past. The total airport revenue is the sum of rental hangars, land leases, and other revenue. The last column is the total amount the city has allocated to the Nampa Municipal Airport from the general fund for the last 5 years.
Mayor, just a quick, I know I'm interrupting, but on 2020, help me with the other revenue, 525,000. What did that entail? 2020 for other revenue not grant related? 2020.
The revenue.
It's just a big difference compared to the other years, so.
Lindsay,
know
would you
that,
be able
Lindsay?
to help me with that?
Councilman Bruner, that was for the Taylor property. The city allocated money to help us purchase that property.
That's the Taylor, so the city went ahead and subsidized? Okay.
So, but that, from what I understand, that will be reimbursed, and that is on our capital improvement plan, and I believe that comes from federal money.
So the city is being reimbursed over time on that?
They will be reimbursed after that project is completed on our capital improvement plan.
Okay, thanks.
And I have another quick question, just to be sure. The total airport revenue, does that include or not include the general fund receipt from the city? So that 137 million, is that 1,000?
It's 1,000, yeah. No,
1,000.
it's
137,000. Okay,
we're
so
taking it down just a little for right now.
Okay, here we go. I was thinking in millions, and yeah.
I'll get to 1 million on my last slide, but that's the impact that we've got. But this, we're talking thousands.
$1 million. We'll just transfer it over. So is your general fund receipt received from the city on top of the 563? It is, okay. So I just want to make sure it wasn't in that number. Thank you.
All right, let's see. So the municipal airport's budget has not included capital improvements to the level needed for city capital maintenance. For example, hangars, equipment, vehicles, non-FAA pavement replacement, of which this pavement replacement is one of the airport's largest capital expenses. Again, the airport has pricing and rate limitations imposed by the FAA. Council recently approved a rate increase for the city-owned hangars to address some of these concerns. However, some future improvements the municipal airport has on our 20-year master plan that do not qualify for federal aviation grants or projects, such as the building the new AWAS that will go on, and ongoing pavement maintenance rehabilitation. So the next slide I have here, I have this property tax table in for informational purposes to understand the amount of property taxes collected from airport hangar owners and the approximate amount the city of Nampa is entitled to. A percentage of these taxes go to the county level and not the city. It also shows that despite the large assessed value increases, the total property taxes paid are not increasing congruently or at the same rate. You can also see that the city of Nampa's portion has been continually decreasing while the county receives a large portion of the property taxes collected from the airport. The concern here with hangar owners and the Airport Commission is when will the property taxes start to reflect the assessed value, and how will levy amounts also affect property taxpayers? This is a rhetorical question at this point, but a concern nonetheless. Private and commercial hangar owners buy, own, build their hangar, maintain the building and land around it, maintain a yearly lease with the airport, and pay property taxes. Regardless if this is a business or a private hangar owner, the county recognizes this land as commercial property. Property taxes paid by airport owners has been a point of contention when rate increases are incurred, because the general feeling is these taxes really should go back to the airport to help cover airport operating costs. The FAA does not recognize property taxes as revenue for the airport. I do want to recognize and take a minute just to thank the City Council for being diligent in allowing these funds to return to the airport for operating costs in current and past years. So thank you for that. So this next slide here is also an informational slide to show total airport improvement program grant amounts. These are only FAA grant eligible projects. The breakdown for the funding received for these grants are approximately 90% from federal aviation grants, 5% of state funds, and 5% of city match funds. It should be noted that if the Nampa Municipal Airport decided to become a private airport, all of the federal aviation funding received for the past 50-plus years would have to be paid back to the governing entities. The city match portion on this slide has been included in the total operating costs on slide 7, the money slide. The city has done a good job in approving matches when the time comes. Sometimes funding comes from the airport's fund and sometimes from the city. That I leave to people with a higher pay grade to let you know when that happens. With these federal aviation grants covering 90% of the project's funding, the city of Nampa is improving its infrastructure for the future use and revenue for a very small fraction of the total cost of the project. This next slide summarizes the airport's budget, with the city of Nampa's tax portion being turned back to the municipal airport. The final column shows a range of $20,000 to $60,000 over the last 5 years that has been allocated to the airport's budget from the City of Nampa's general fund, above and beyond the City of Nampa's tax portion. I do want to remind you again, the general fund receipt does include any city matching dollars required when receiving airport improvement grant funding. So who uses Nampa's Municipal Airport? Listed are 20 businesses, for-profit and nonprofit, located on Nampa's Municipal Airport. We are seeing an increased use of air medical services, and from what I understand, the Boise Airport is now rarely using what I understand is that the Boise Airport is now rarely used for medical transfers to larger medical facilities, and the Nampa Municipal Airport is used much more frequently for these transfers. In the past, pilots at the airport have volunteered time and resources for search and rescue, for game and wildlife management. To give you an idea of airport use in the last 6 months, we looked at the pilots that checked in over the last 6 months. 94% of those that checked in had a telephone number area code number that was out of state. And FlightAware software in the month of July alone showed 114 different aircraft landings at our airport, and these aircraft are not Nampa-based. And our airport can assume that this traffic can be both business and pleasure above and beyond Nampa's based aircraft. Now that we've summarized background of the requirements, governing rules, and parameters the airport must work within, my goal now is to have a better basis in understanding why the municipal airport is unable to operate like a golf course, civic center, or a storage unit. These places can and do operate more like a privatized business where the goal is to run for profit. They are available for matters other than its primary business, does not have to be available to the public, and there are no limits as to who can use this property. Comparing a hangar price to a storage unit price is unique for 2 reasons. 1, there are limits to what can be stored in a hangar, and 2, hangar owners are responsible for the grounds in and around their hangar, including capital improvements to their property. For example, if the siding comes off of a building in a windstorm, the hangar owner is responsible to have a certain level of insurance and fix this on their own dime, whereas a storage unit, if the siding comes off, the property manager would be responsible for maintaining the appropriate insurance coverage and fix the damage at the company level, not the individual storage unit renter.
Aubrey, could I ask
Yes,
a
ma'am.
question? Is that true for the city-owned hangars that are rented? Versus your land lease that owns the hangar?
So yes, I do end up saying that this is a cost, however, that the airport has to take into consideration for their city-owned hangars as well. So both on the private side, they've got to take that into consideration, and then for the chunk that the city has, we have to take that into consideration too.
Okay, thank you.
But one of the things that cost on a storage unit side, that cost is wrapped up into the storage unit's price per square foot. So essentially, the airport would do the same thing, have that price wrapped up into the price per square foot. The golf course, civic center, and storage units can attract and enter into contract with anyone for rent or lease of space or land, ranging from real estate, retail, or entertainment. And as I had mentioned before, the airport has to keep things aeronautical in nature. Next slide here. Nampa has a much different mission and vision than the two closest airports, so why don't we run Nampa like Boise or Caldwell? The Boise airport is much larger with consistent commercial services. Boise has more amenities and services than what the Nampa airport provides. They are eligible for different kinds of aviation grants, not to mention the Air Force National Guard is located on the field. To summarize the Caldwell Executive Airport's mission statement, their mission is to provide the best possible aviation opportunities at a reasonable cost for their customers, have a great time while doing it, while being a jumping off point to Idaho's backcountry. The actual direction and feel Caldwell is going is different, definitely wanting to cater to the larger corporate jet crowd. Caldwell's general aviation friends, however, prefer to keep it a smaller airport community. Sorry, my contacts are blurry. Anyway, Caldwell has a larger, wider runway for a different variety of aircraft. They can apply for different federal aviation grants as well, and they have handled leases very differently in the past than what Nampa has, resulting in fewer tenants to charge market rate increases to. To summarize the Nampa Municipal Airport's mission and vision, Nampa wants to be a destination airport for general aviation and smaller corporate aircraft that encourages a friendly, high-quality service that promotes tourism, and to be a backcountry gateway. The Nampa Airport Commission feels we've held true to maximizing business opportunities at the airport while having a general aviation feel. Nampa is limited to the size of the aircraft that can use the airport because of runway constraints, with no plans to expand other than a consideration for a grass airstrip on the field that would really cater to our backcountry pilot friends.
Mayor, just if I may, just a quick question since you mentioned Caldwell. Fresh news that they
Sorry.
are kind of redoing.
Maybe I shouldn't have.
Yeah, right, kind of redoing their, going to have an advisory board, not going to have their commissioners as currently the new director. In fact, that made the front page of the paper this morning. Do you have any, have you heard the rumor mill or whatever? Do you know what truly their direction or projection is going to be for service? Do you feel comfortable even speaking to that issue?
Well, we do have some Caldwell friends here if they would like to speak on their behalf. How about briefly?
I'm just curious what
briefly, I could say that our general aviation friends are not happy with that decision because they feel like their voice is not going to be heard at the airport. So I think I can safely say that. Okay.
So the director is going to, and I'm pretty blunt, but he's going against what the current opinion is over there, is what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's yet to be decided.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
With all that being said, the Nampa Airport is so grateful for your guys' support. I mean, we really do appreciate what you guys do for us, so thank you. Let's see, this slide, now we know the rules the airport adheres to and have a summary of the cost of running the airport. I'm moving to the economic impact the municipal airport has on the city of Nampa. This information has been taken from and can be referenced on page 7 of the Idaho Airport Systems Plan Update and Airport Economic Impact Analysis for 2020, a summary report prepared for the Idaho Transportation Department Division of Aeronautics. I've included terminology on this slide and the next slide for reference just to help define the parameters of the compiled study for the state should you want further information. I do think it's somewhat noteworthy to set the groundwork for this study that was performed. The study states that economic impact is a measure of the spending and employment associated with a sector of the economy, a specific project, or a change in government policy or regulation. The 2020 Idaho Airport Economic Impact Analysis Update focuses on the employment and spending associated with the civil air transportation sector. Military aviation was excluded from this analysis. Economic impacts is most commonly measured in employment, earnings or income, gross domestic product, and economic output. And these measures are defined in Figure 1. And this is just for informational purposes only if you want to reference back to that, but I'm going to move to the next slide if you will. Perfect. I've pulled some key numbers from the Idaho Division of Aeronautics Economic Impact Study in 2020, but there are an additional 100-plus pages for your review if you would like to look at it more in depth. The study can be found on the resources slide. The study determined the total output resulting from the Nampa Municipal Airport is $106.6 million. Total outputs are the sum of direct, indirect, induced, and visitor spending impacts. Though the $106 million is impressive, researchers have run their fancy algorithms, or perhaps AI, to estimate this number, but I think the more impressive and tangible numbers lie in the amount of people employed as a result of the airport and the direct total impact the airport has on the city of Nampa. The 2020 study calculates 575 people are employed through businesses at the airport. We have had new businesses move to our airfield since this was published, so this number is higher. According to the City of Nampa's website, this employment number ranks higher than NNU's and Valley View's school employees. Mission Aviation Fellowship alone employs 300 of these, with 150 employees local. The Nampa Municipal Airport's direct impact on the city of Nampa is estimated at $12.78 million, while noting the total impact of visitor spending accounts for $2.17 million. The Warhawk Air Museum conducted their own economic impact study through NNU's American Marketing Association students in 2018, and this study concluded the Warhawk Air Museum's annual impact economic impact accounts for $2.13 million. The most impressive number is the total direct economic impact of the airport when employment, building, tourism, and so forth is added up. This number is approximately $25.85 million. Yes, million this time, not thousands. Again, let's let that sink in, $25.85 million. This number is not run through the algorithms or AI, but 25 million direct dollars the city experiences because of its gateway. The city has diligently supported with a relatively small annual investment ranging from $20,000 to $60,000 a year. I don't know about you, but Monty, Lindsay, John, and Jennifer, with the aid of the Transportation Department, currently Crystal, is a small but mighty team and has delivered an astounding value to the city. I think it's safe to say the airport's economic impact in Nampa is rather significant for a relatively small amount and makes for a great return on investment. And last, the mayor often talks about wanting the airport to be self-sustaining. There are few airports across the country similar in size and operations that are self-sustaining without surrounding non-aviation land rental. This number is very hard to find, and aviation consultants have verified there are few of these general aviation airports to compare ourselves against. The airport staff and commission have continued to try to fairly adjust prices to be more competitive and self-sustaining. Airport Business Solutions has provided their expertise in the form of a business plan with a market rate analysis. The airport has applied market rate increases and consumer price index increases while evaluating property value assessments, the state in which city buildings are in, as well as taking surrounding airport increases into consideration when making these lease rate adjustments. The Airport Commission feels like we've taken the rules we need to follow, the advice of industry professionals, and the need of the city into consideration when making financial decisions for the airport. With full transparency, I did not look for information on the economic impact of other city-owned investments, what they might have compared to the airport. I'd feel confident in saying, though, that public parks, libraries, and storage units don't quite have the same economic impact as the Nampa Municipal Airport. Ultimately, a small annual investment by the city into the airport is money well spent. So thank you for your time. And if I can answer questions, I'll do my best, but it'll probably be Lindsay.
I just want to say that was an excellent presentation. Excellent. Team, thank you for the hard work that went into that. It's so informative. And I really, really appreciate the effort. And we have an amazing team. And Aubrey, thank you for your leadership on the commission and the work that you do because of your background and approach. You've been a tremendous asset. And so thank you so much. And this was really, really good. And I think we needed it. So council, do you have questions?
Mayor, I'm more personal. Aubrey, you mentioned you started flying when you were in high school.
Yep.
What did your dad or mom, or what incentivized you to do so? I think that's not real common.
No, my dad said he was going to go through his midlife crisis, and my mom said, no women, no booze, and he said, I want to fly. And she said, well, me too. And so they both learned to fly, and when I was a senior in high school, I only needed 4 classes for both semesters to graduate, so I petitioned my school to see if I could learn to fly in the mornings and then go to school in the afternoon.
And you spent 4 years in Grand Forks, North Dakota?
Sure did.
I spent 6, so, well.
Well done.
We're enduring people, right?
Well done. Haven't been back.
I wasn't flying, though. It wasn't near as interesting as what you were doing.
That's great. Councilman Rodriguez, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just think it's great. I love to hear these numbers. But something popped up while you were telling me what impact they have for our community. So down the road, when are we going to invest in a motel?
Down the road, can we invest in a motel?
On the
Premises?
airport property?
Yeah, on the airport property.
I don't know that we have room for a motel on the airport property, but I would leave that to the recommendation of the commission and.
I don't believe
the
that's on the
appropriateness.
20-year plan.
I know I just threw you a curve, but you know, availability, and I don't know that we have the property, I don't know if we'll ever do it, but it was just something that is there. Our service is increasing. Our airport is increasing in venue, and so I thought, you know, maybe down the road, 50 years from now, or.
I don't know what
Yeah, I
the
know there's
rules
close
behind that
motels.
would
I know.
be, but it would be interesting to have airport-owned property, perhaps not on the airfield, to be able to help
There you
offset
go.
those
Yeah.
types of operating costs and bring in a
We're getting
different
big
kind
enough.
of revenue.
We're getting big enough, I think maybe
So.
down the road. I'm just saying.
Well, the good news is that, and I've seen it, we have Lyft and Uber drivers, and I've seen pilots that are waiting for their ride that have flown in. We have hotels very close by and places to eat very close by. And hopefully, you know, we've applied twice for the terminal grant. I think the deadline's coming up for the 3rd time, and we hopefully will receive a grant to replace our terminal. That's really important. And we've got such a wonderful destination there for food with the Tower Grill that needs to expand. We need the ADA compliance in that building. That building is just really at its end. I think that as we move forward with the airport master plan, I think there's such tremendous opportunity there while staying, and I like to say the best little airport, right? That we've-
And that's okay. We want to keep it that way. We don't want to expand so much that, we don't want to lose the small town feel for sure.
Absolutely, yet having the needed amenities right there to where we have that right thing. Tremendous work went into that master plan and then followed up by the business plan. And I tell you, a lot of due diligence in the economic impact studies, the diligence that has taken place over the last several years is outstanding. We have a phenomenal team, great commission, hasn't been easy, right? It has not been easy, but it's been good. And we're going in the right
I feel like it's been a good
direction.
working relationship though too with, so you guys have done a fantastic job at allowing that to happen.
And we'll continue to go there.
So.
But this information was absolutely invaluable. Great job. Great job. Okay.
Thank you.
you so much. Thank you, team. Really appreciate it. So the next item on our agenda is actually executive session. And so I would stand for a motion to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 742061C to acquire interest in real property not owned by a public agency and to consider labor contract matters authorized under Section 74206A1A and B of Idaho Code.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call. Victor Rodriguez.
Bruner,
Yes.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Haverfield,
Yes.
And go ahead and go do Rodriguez. You do them all. Yeah.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Jangula,
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate the input. So thank you all, and we will quickly get ready. We will change, thank you, Rick. We are changing over to a different Teams link for the executive session. So I think we'll see everyone connecting back online.
So sometimes I have to go ask Dad for a moment.
Right, yeah.
And then sometimes I just say, let's do that, and we'll get it figured out.
You take one and
Hey.
pass it. I'll have an excess.
Is Doug online?
Take one of these and have it.
I am on.
Okay.